everyone, and welcome back to Autumn Leigh at Home. I'm Autumn Leigh if you're new. Today we are going to pickle some okra. This is what we got from our farmer's market. We recently had the opportunity to go to a farmer's market with my family, and I love this season because you get so many fun ideas and get inspired a lot with everything that you can pickle, can, all of that. And today our goal is pickled okra. We did this last year. I was very pleasantly surprised at how much my family absolutely loved it. So we are going to do it again today. So let's get started. If you are new to this channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the like button down below. Today we are doing pickled okra, and if you buy this, it is $7 per jar pre-made. So that is why we are baking it ourselves. To start off, I want to go ahead and get started getting my jars cleaned and on the stove. That way they can start warming up while I'm getting my brine ready, because once the brine is ready, this is one of the simplest things that you can. You don't have to do any prep with the okra itself unless you just want to, but other than just cleaning it and rinsing it off, all you have to do is stick these little guys straight in the jar, pour the brine over it, and you're good to go. Then stick it in the water bath canner, and it's that simple. So to get started, I'm gonna wash my jars. In the past, it used to be required that you sterilize your jars and put them in a rolling boil water for over 10 minutes to sterilize them. That is no longer a requirement, and I will put that link down in the description below. That way you can do your own research, but I am learning and I would love for you guys to teach me too. So if I ever miss anything, definitely kindly correct me down in the comments. I'd be happy to learn. But I'm so happy you guys are here with me, and we are currently washing the jars. I don't like to use them straight off my shelf. After using them, anytime we open a jar, use the ingredients or the contents, I always wash the jars and then set them back on the shelf. But because sometimes they sit on the shelf for a little bit, they collect dust. And just to make sure that we have nice clean jars, you can either run them through the dishwasher, or like me, I don't always trust my dishwasher. So I like to hand wash them, just give them a good rinse, let them air dry on the counter, and then you're good to go. Here is my water bath canner. It is nothing special. It just looks like a big old pot. It does have a rack on the inside. Let's see if I can show you what it looks like. Mine happens to have that rack on the inside. If yours doesn't have that, that's fine. You do need some sort of barrier between your jars and your pot itself. That way your jars don't crack when they start to water bath and boil and start moving around. You don't want them to crack. So even if you take a normal pot and put a dish towel underneath it, that is just fine. You can use that. But we're gonna go ahead and get this filled up. I want to put my jars in here so they can start warming up. If you are new to canning, I will give a very quick rundown of the difference between water bath canning and pressure canning. Today we are doing water bath canning, which means we just use a big pot and we boil our jars for whatever the processing time is that is required. And today that is going to be for 15 minutes. But if you're pressure canning, you want to do that with anything that is very basic. So like meats, vegetables, things like that that are very basic in pH level. Those you have to pressure can with. Water bath canning, because we are doing pickled okra, so you may think, oh, it's okra, you need to pressure can, and that would be the case if we weren't pickling it. But because we're pickling it, which means we're using vinegar, they are perfectly safe to water bath can because the pH level is more acidic. So that's why we're doing water bath canning. And with that, we want to put all of our jars in the pot like you saw me do, fill the pot with water. Ultimately, our goal is just to warm the jars up. So we're filling the jars with water, filling the pot with water, and I'm gonna sit that, or I did sit that on the stove to allow those jars to warm up. And I just kind of put it on low to low medium heat to allow that to happen, kind of come to a simmer while I'm preparing everything else. Our end goal is to have all of the ingredients in the jars and the water and the liquid and the brine and everything to be warm or steamy so that it doesn't crack any of the jars. The jar's warming can take a little bit, so I would go ahead and do that step first. Next, we cleaned and slash rinsed our okra off, as well as got started on our brine. And these are the ingredients that we needed for the brine. The brine is the salt water, white vinegar, clear liquid mixture that you pour over the okra to make it pickled. Today we are going to be using the Complete Book of Home Preservation by Ball, and this one I will link down in the description below if you're interested in trying to find it yourself as well and follow along with us. If not, you're welcome to watch this video because we're just going to go step by step from the instructions in here. That way we do everything well and correctly. But first it calls for 3 cups of water and 3 cups of white vinegar. So I'm gonna go ahead and I have my pot here. I also have my little helper here. She wants to help as well. And we'll start off with those ingredients first, and then we're gonna peel some garlic to go in the jars as well. The recipe calls for 3 cups of water, 3 cups of white vinegar, 1/3 cup of either pickling or canning salt. You just don't want to use iodized salt. And last but not least, once you add the salt, you're going to add 2 teaspoons of mustard seed to your brine, and then this brine is complete. You could go ahead and put it on the stove. Last year when I made this, I didn't read this step completely correctly. I thought you needed to add your garlic to the brine while you're boiling it, so that's what I did. And I found out that when you do that, garlic turns blue, which completely caught me off guard. It was a little weird to see, but actually pretty cool and totally safe to use. We have our brine ready and finished, and I'm just gonna go ahead and stick this on the stove, and it says to bring it to a boil and then keep it hot until our okra is ready. Now that we have our brine on the stove, we're gonna bring it to a boil. I'm gonna stir it occasionally because we want the salt to dissolve down into the brine. Once that's done and it's boiled for, until the salt is dissolved, then we wanna keep it hot until it's ready to use on our okra. You gonna help mommy with the garlic cloves? When you're canning, whether it's pressure canning or water bath canning, it's really important to stick with the exact measurements that are recommended in the book, as well as the safety measures. That way it can prevent things like botulism, which you can't see, and we don't want to make our family sick. But as long as you're following those instructions, then it's perfectly safe to do this, and it's actually really good. Those are all learning things that we are doing, and obviously sometimes when you're first learning, it's scary because sometimes people online teach you one way and they're like, oh, my grandma's been doing this for 100 years versus what they teach you in the book. And their way may not be wrong, but when you're first learning, it's so hard to determine what's wrong and what's right. And it's always best to go safety first and stick with recommended guidelines. I'm gonna push the pause button on our project right now because I need to go pick up my daughter from camp. And when we get back, we will start pickling our okra again and canning it and finishing with the brine. But I turned everything off while I'm gone. And as soon as we get back, you guys get to come along with me as we cook dinner and finish our canning project. And today we are going to make homemade quiche using tortillas and eggs. So follow along. As soon as we get back, I will start back up. After a brief pause of stopping and going to get my daughter, I had turned everything off before I left, and I figured it was actually at a pretty good stopping point because my brine hadn't started boiling. It hadn't really even started simmering yet, and my jars, I knew because the water was already hot, if I turned my stove off, they would still stay warm because there was so much water that was already warm in that pot. So everything was at a good stopping point. I had turned everything off. Now that I'm back, I went ahead and turned everything back on. I also got my cast iron out for our quiche. So you saw me get that out, and I went ahead and stuck it in the oven so that the cast iron and the oven could go ahead and preheat up together. And I think I did it at 375 degrees. Now I'm just mixing all of our ingredients. Here you saw me get cottage cheese, and I blended that since I needed to scramble my eggs anyway. I used about 10 eggs for a cast iron of my size, the one that we have, and blended about 2 or 3 spoonfuls of cottage cheese in with the eggs and pretty much pureed them. I blended them up. Now I'm literally just adding whatever ingredients you happen to have. It does not have to be spinach. I have spinach, bacon bits, cheese, because that's what I have. If you have bacon, you could just crunch up some bacon, cook bacon into it. If you have leftover ham from a dinner the night before, you could chop that up, stick that in there. I've done that before. This is such a versatile thing that you can just use whatever you have. If you have cherry tomatoes, because you happen to have tomatoes in the from your garden that are garden fresh, because it's summertime, or just chopped Roma tomatoes, whatever you happen to have, stick in there. Peppers, onions, whatever. Sky's the limit. You can mix whatever you want in your quiche. And our favorite is cottage cheese, pureed or blended in with the egg, as well as spinach, bacon bits, and cheese. That has been our all-time favorite thing. We love the flavor of it. Of course, I put a good heaping helping of salt and pepper because that gives it flavor. Preferably more pepper than salt because salt's not always the best, but you can put whatever seasonings in there that you want. Literally just stir it up. Sometimes I have the issue of all the cheese and bacon kind of dropping to the bottom, so I frequently have to stir it up because then also you have the issue of the spinach floating to the top. So that may happen. It's not a big deal if it does. The taste is still there. It still tastes fantastic. Now I just put about a tablespoon of butter in the bottom of the cast iron while it was hot, let it kind of stir around, get all nice and melted, and literally just took 3 tortillas, sat them on top, and poured this over the top of it. From there, you take this, I gave it a little bit of a stir just to try to get all of the ingredients blended up, but you'll see later on that the spinach kind of floated to the top as it was cooking, and that's okay because it still tasted great. You literally take that pot or that cast iron and stick it back in the oven and you are done. I placed all of that in the oven at 375 degrees. It usually takes anywhere from about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. I would start checking it at about 25 minutes. It's not an exact science because it all depends on what ingredients you use as well as how many eggs you use. So you just kind of have to keep an eye on it, but you don't want the center to be leaky / wobbly. So if you pull your quiche out and the center still looks liquidy or kind of sunken in, you want to leave it in there and allow it to keep cooking until that center is nice and done. If you need to, you can always also put aluminum foil over the top if it starts burning. But I'm doing all of this and cooking all of that while my stove is heating back up and my brine is heating back up and my pot is heating back up. So we're utilizing our time. Now that the quiche is finally back in the oven, we are able to refocus on our project here. And now I'm pulling out all of the pieces that I need, such as the funnel, the tongs, and I'm currently going through the lids and making sure that I can find some lids that don't have rust, dents. You'll see me in a little bit looking at them and kind of inspecting them. And I did find a couple that I had pulled that had rust or a dent, and I usually end up throwing those away, or I'll put them in a drawer and use them for refrigerator canning or that sort of thing, where it really doesn't matter if your jar seals or not. So anytime you do refrigerator canning, so like our pickled okra we could do, and towards the end I think I end up doing 1 jar of refrigerator pickled okra, and for that the amount of ingredients doesn't have to be exact. It's not a big deal, and you don't have to use lids that are, or rings that are, perfectly perfect. You can just use whatever you happen to have. But this is a headspace measuring tool, 1/2 inch, which is what we need for pickled okra. The brine, between the brine and the top of the jar is the headspace, and we need at least 1/2 inch. And that measuring tool allows us to sit it on the rim and measure how much headspace we have between the two. These are the lids that we bought for our canning project for today, the ball canning lids. Now, depending on whether you have a regular mouth jar or a wide mouth jar, just means the size of the opening of the jar. We have regular ones today, and as you can see, I found a dent on this one. I don't have to throw this ring away. I'm just going to put it in a drawer and use it for like our pickling projects in the refrigerator, or sometimes I put fresh fruit and vegetables in jars to keep them fresh longer in the refrigerator, and that helps a lot. So I'll save that and it won't go to waste. But once we inspect those, I went ahead and pulled our pot back over of hot water and jars, and it's time to pull the jars out to get them ready for pickling. Always open the lid away from you. You will only make that mistake once because the smoke can be really hot, the steam can, and it can burn your arm, it can burn your face, so you just want to be really careful. But now I'm taking all of the jars out. I'm pouring the liquid, the water that's in the pot or in the jar, back in the pot. And that way, when I go to put these jars back in the pot, it actually allows it to increase that headspace to make sure it's over an inch above the jars. You want the water to be at least an inch above the jars when you go to water bath can them. And right now, while I'm taking the jars out, when you're taking them out of a hot pot and they're hot jars, you want to make sure you put some sort of barrier underneath them between the hot jars and the cold surface of your counter. So that's why you see the dish towel down. Now that I have them out, I'm kind of working against the clock because the jars are cooling off pretty quick. So I'm trying to get the okra packed down in, and the more you can pack in the jar, the better, because just like cucumbers, when you're pickling cucumbers and make them into pickles, the same thing is with okra. You want to pack as many as you can down in there because they end up floating up to the surface. And the more you can pack in there, the less likely they are to do that. Obviously, you'll see at the end, mine end up floating either way, even though I know I stuffed these really thick. But you pack them down as much as you can, try to get as many as you can in the jar, and then you'll be good to go. As I'm packing the jars with the okra, you know, it's really hard to catch the timing. I'm learning that you're having to can things when the vegetables are ready, not when it's convenient for you. That's something that's kind of been a learning curve for me, especially pulling things out of my own garden or even buying them from the farmer's market. You have to get them when they're in season, and then once you get them, you need to cook them or can them or preserve them in a timely manner so that they don't go bad. And that's kind of what happened with these okra. It hasn't been that long since I bought them, but because they were farm fresh from a local farmer, they started going bad a little bit. So as I was packing these, I made sure to pull out the ones that weren't, top notch, that had maybe a few spots on them, and I will still use them. I'll still eat them. We will make those refrigerator pickled okra instead of canning them to preserve them on a shelf for an extended period of time. And that last jar that I was using, the leftover brine that you see is not full of brine, that's the one that ends up being a refrigerator pickled okra. So we ended up with 6 pints out of 2.5 pounds. And that is definitely not what the recipe said we would get. The recipe said we would get 4 pints, but that's fantastic. I love having more than rather than less, so it worked out well. But as you can see, I just poured all of the brine in. I pulled the quiche out when the timer went off, and it was nice and brown and firm in the center. So I let that sit on the counter because it's really piping hot and I want it to cool. And while that's cooling, I am finishing up the cans by pouring the brine over the okra. And the brine, again, is just that clear liquid that we cooked on the stove and brought to a boil to dissolve all of the salt. And after I pour it over, I want to stick the garlic in. I put the lids on and then forgot that I needed to debubble the jars, or burp the jars is another way of saying it, which means that you just take a chopstick, an end of a spoon, a knife. I use the end of the headspace measuring tool, and you just want to kind of move it around and wiggle it in the jars to release any bubbles so that you don't have an increased risk of your jars not sealing. And my son's being a good big brother and getting my daughter's stuck bow out of her hair, so thank you, Jacob, for that. But once we have the jars burped, we have the brine in there. I did go ahead and stuff 1 clove of garlic in each one as well. It is finally time to clean the rim of the jar, which means that I'm taking white vinegar and rubbing the edge of the jar just to make sure there's no salt or anything sticky on there so that we get a good seal. And it's time to put our lids on finger tight, which just means that you spin the lid on, you put the lid on, then you put the ring on, and you spin the ring until you meet resistance, and then just a little bit more. The cans are finally officially ready to go back in the water bath canning pot. So I went ahead, while we were putting all of the ingredients in the cans, I put the pot back on the stove to keep the water warm. So hopefully, again, the idea is that everything is still warm so that your jars don't crack. And put them all back in. Make sure that the water is at least an inch above, which we kind of discussed earlier. And one of the ways that I check this, because you don't want to stick your finger in there to check if it's an inch above the cans, is by sticking a utensil or something of that sort to see. Because usually you can see a faint water line on the utensil of how deep the water is once you pull it out. And that way it gives you a good idea of whether it's 1 inch or not. And I know I keep going back and forth between canning and the quiche for dinner and going over dinner, but that's life. This is the beautiful chaos of trying to can and preserve food while feeding your family. And tonight was just a really high protein dinner. You can see my dessert here for the kids was banana covered in peanut butter with chocolate chips on top. That was their dessert. So the high protein dinner of quiche with the egg, bacon, cheese, cottage cheese, spinach, everything in it was just super healthy. It was a very filling dinner for them. And I did do a couple of sides with the quiche as well, but obviously they absolutely loved it. When I placed the water bath canner back on the stove, I went ahead and put it kind of more of a medium-high heat. That way it could come up to a rolling boil. A rolling boil is where you have boiling water, and even if you were to stir, the boiling part wouldn't go away. That's what you want to see. Once you see that continuous rolling boil, then you can set your timer for processing time. And everything is going to have a different processing time, so make sure you look to see what the correct processing time is for the contents of your jar. So for us in particular, the headspace was 1/2 inch and the processing time was 15 minutes for pint size. So the size of the jar can change the processing time, as well as the contents of the jar can change the processing time. Same thing with the headspace. The headspace can change depending on what the contents of the jar are. Once the timer went off for the 15 minutes, I turned the stove off and I did not move my water bath canner or the jars. I allowed them to sit there for at least 5 to 10 minutes. Usually I like to let them sit there for a good 20 or so minutes, if not longer, just to allow the jars a chance to kind of settle and the pot to cool down, and then you can pull the jars out. Once you pull them out, you can leave them on the counter. Don't try to take the rings off yet. Allow them to fully cool until the next day. Again, make sure that there's some sort of barrier between your jars and the counter, because the jars are hot and the counter's cold. You don't want them to crack. But once the jars have cooled the next day, you can take the rings off and give them a gentle, warm, soapy wash and place them on your pantry shelf. We were able to finish our project for today and make pickled okra. I did have some okra left over from this project that weren't quite good enough to be able to put in here. They were starting to go a little bad, so I didn't feel comfortable canning it and preserving it that way. But it's also not so bad that I need to throw it out. It's just like little spots on it that probably weren't best to can with. But what I might do is turn it into refrigerator pickled okra and just have one jar of that. So I'm currently making a little bit more brine so that I can make that. And the brine is really simple doing refrigerator pickled okra. I'll put a link down. I'll probably turn it into a short and put a link down in the description so that you guys can watch it if you would like to. Peach season is coming up, so I'm gonna put a video right here that is being able to can and make peach jelly using peach peels and pits. I'll put that video right there. And in the description, I'm gonna put a food preservation playlist. That way, if you guys wanna join in on some other projects that we've done, this is a learning process. I've been doing this for about 3 years now, and I've learned a lot, and I'm just now starting to get more comfortable with it. I feel like I can do it while doing other things. Like today we cooked dinner while doing it, and I went and picked up kids and had to pause, and life happens, but it's definitely something that I feel like I've grown in, and I want to continue to grow, because in the future, if I have a large garden at some point in the future, which is our hope, then I want to know what to do with the food. I don't want it to go to bad or go to waste because I don't know how to preserve it or cook with it or anything like that. So this is kind of a stepping stone, and using this season of life to be able to do that is great. So I will put that video here, the playlist, down in the description. And I just want to take this time to say thank you so much for joining me here today, Autumn Leigh at home. I truly appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up down below, like, subscribe, and share. And I hope to see you guys next time.